dumb, dummy, and disrespect your mommy. Who put you on this earth? Huh? Now who loved you since you were? The war is a brainwash kid going wild. Young little girls already have a child. Bad company, and now you've been trained. Hurting and ashamed. And your mommy can't cook. Hey, little kids don't follow these jokes. Your life don't do it. Don't be a fool like those that don't go to school. Get ahead and accomplish things. You'll see the wonder and the joy life brings. Don't admire these. Hey, they don't admire you. Their time's limited and hard rocks too. So their time's limited and hard rocks too. So their time's limited and hard rocks too. So listen, so strong, look at you. Go for yours, cause dreams come true. And you're making it. I'm so proud of you too. And this is so much that the moving record, moving record, moving record.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you all for tuning into this episode 25 of the P.W.P sessions. That's the Poets with Purpose sessions. I'm your host, Noelle Figueroa, and thank you all for tuning into this nice episode. And I'm very excited to be interviewing another awesome poet and author by the name of Megha Sood. Now, I'm just going to be giving an introduction before we dive right into the conversation. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, for those that are not familiar with this podcast, the P.W.P sessions is a podcast where I conduct interviews with new or established authors of poetry and feature a performance of their work along with an audience Q&A session. I'm Noelle Figueroa. I am the poet, also known as the Anointed Pen. I am a poet, author, blogger, workshop facilitator, and event host, and I am the creator of the P.W.P sessions. Now, tonight's guest is Megha Sood. Megha Sood is a Pushcart nominated award-winning poet, editor, author, and literary activist based in New Jersey. She is an associate poetry editor at Mookie Chick out of the United Kingdom, Life and Legends out of the USA, and literary partner in the project Life in Quarantine, with Stanford University, USA. Works featured in journals including Poetry Society of New York, American Writers Review, Kissing Dynamite, Rising Phoenix Review, and many more. She is the author of the chapbook, My Body is Not an Apology, Finishing Line Press 2021, and full-length, My Body Lives Like a Threat, Flower Song Press 2021. She is co-editor of anthologies The Medusa Project, Mookie Chick, and The Cali Project, Indie Blue Press. She is the recipient of Poet Fellowship 2021, MVICW, Martha's Vineyard Institute of Creative Writing, national level winner Spring Mahogany Lit Prize, and three-time state level winner of New Jersey Poetry Contest blogs at megasworldsite.wordpress.com. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's guest, Megha Sood. Hi, Megha, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much, Noel, for giving me the platform and giving me the space and the time.
Oh, you're very welcome. I was looking forward to this interview. Thank you so much for being my guest tonight. So I'm going to start off with a basic question, like I start off as with my previous episodes. Who is Megha Sood? How would you describe yourself or define yourself?
Uh, okay. So, Megha Sood, she's a mother. She's a person of color. She's a first generation immigrant and an author and a poet in her own way, uh, she's trying to bring the message of love, equality, and respect through her poems and making sure that the people who are passionate towards their mission can get inspired from me and follow their own mission and bring a change in the world that we truly deserve.
Excellent, excellent. Now, now all of our writing journeys and poetical journeys are different. how would you say did you get started, or what was your reasons or inspirations for getting started with poetry?
So poetry like came at very late in my life. So it was not like I was writing when I was young or when I was a kid, because I had a very different journey. I did my master's in computer application and then in postgraduate, and then I did like I was a project manager for almost like a decade and plus for business intelligence and data modeling. And since the last 4 years after shifting, like I came in US in around 2008, and then I kind of like took a back seat from the my main job, because I was like sacrificing too much of my personal life for meeting the demands of my professional life. So then when and then my I started like writing here and there on Facebook, and then I was getting like positive feedback like you get from like friends and family because they're biased. So then somebody actually told me that if you want to get a constructive feedback or some critical feedback for your work, then you should start a WordPress blog. So that I kind of started in the end of 2017, uh, like around October, November. And I started writing poems. So initially when I started writing poems, it was more about like nature, life, and introspection, and about silence, and then also about women centric issues. And because while growing up in India, I was always surrounded in like the issues which are like the women face, and always the issues about caste inequality, like uh, violence against women and familial inequality and all that. But it I never had the time to sit down and like pen my thoughts. But I always thought that I have to do something about it. So I in my own way I was always an activist, because I have seen myself through my school years, formative years, and my like working years as well, that I used to stand up for people's right. It's just like I didn't choose poetry as my medium. But when I started my WordPress blog, the few initial poems that I started writing about was mostly like women centric poems. So I kind of wrote like 6 7 poems about the issues which I faced while growing up in India. Some of them I actively witnessed, or some of them I was like passively witnessed too. So there were issues about women sexual violence, and all the other issues. And then 3 months after just opening the blog, I was being invited by a feminist journal in based out of Philadelphia. And they not only accepted my poems for publication, but they also invited me to be part of their literary collective. And from there, from one collective, it grew to 5 different collective which I was like invited to, and I became member. And from there I started sending out my works to various journal and socially conscious anthologies, because i I never dreamt about of publishing my book or chapbook or anything. All I had in my mind was, how should I use the gift which has been given to me in form of creative writing, in form of poetry, and use that to educate myself about the issues which are surrounding me, and also to generate the awareness about it. So that's how it started. And from there I just kept on learning and growing, and started and kept on honing my craft. And in the span of 4 years, this is where I am.
Yeah, that's very powerful, and that in itself is very inspiring, because you know many, or I should say most of us, have a willingness and the desire to speak about the issues that affect us on a regular basis, but sometimes we may not know how to get started. And it's very fortunate that you found a way to start, and from that beginning you were able to build on that foundation that you laid for yourself to get to where you are now. So that in itself is very much of an inspiration, because we do need a voice to speak to these everyday issues that affect all of us.
Yeah.
Some of these issues are interconnected, for lack of a better word, because what affects women does affect all people. What affects people of color does affect all people in some way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? So it's important that we have voices that give clarity and understanding, and most importantly, truth to these issues. It's very inspiring and very important, and I do honor you and commend you for that. That's an awesome accomplishment in itself. Now, who or what would you say that you would give credit to into helping you develop your skills as a writer and a poet?
So Yeah. So initially, if you go back to my school days, I'm like one of my teachers in Hindi. So she was the literature teacher. So she used to, I don't know what she saw. I was a, like a shy person, if you believe, if you can believe that. But then she actually, molded me into a person who can like, she got me into public speaking basically in the school. And then because of that, I got exposed to a lot of literature around me. I used to read about it, and I used to like go to debates and allocation and all that. And when you go to such events, you're not only expressing your own opinion, but you're also get to hear the opinion of other people, and that's how your perspective becomes like broader and broader, right? And then my whole education and professional life was strictly technological based, so there was nothing about literature or creative works. I never had the time to do that. It was very demanding. But then when I started the WordPress blog and joined the literary collectives, so they were this, it was the like the female based literary collective, and that's how my network started. And they were like authors who have been writing for good like 20 years. So they brought a dearth of experience, and some of them, they are still my mentors. I would like to name them Christine E. Ray and Candice Louisa Darcoin, and I have worked with them on different anthologies, and I have grown with them through the years. So they kind of like showed me the way, in a way, that how to stay focused and how to work. Because initially when I used to write, my writing style like into the stream of consciousness kind of writing. So I used to sit down and write in one go with very less or few edits. But the more and more started educating myself by reading the works of contemporary poets and classical poets and all that, I realized that the poetry has so much to offer, and it has like 26 different forms, and it not only has its own craft which you have to work on it. But when I read the work of contemporary poets, I was very strongly inspired by them. Why? Because they are living in the same time as I am, and they are facing the same issue. And then I realized that they are not only using their poetic brilliance, right, because they are like extremely brilliant amazing poets, but also they're using their platform to inform the people, to bring the common people in their folds, and inform the people about the issues which are happening around. So to quote some of the few poets like Ilya Kaminsky, he talks about the effect of war on the country and its people. And then Jericho Brown talks about the suppression, systemic oppression of people of color and African American in United States and across the world. And then Kaveh Akbar, Ocean Wong, Ada Limon, you name it. So then I realized that if this is such a strong medium, and I can use the same medium, and I can harness the power of poetry. And that's how I started. And it kind of inspired me. And obviously these are the people who are like the literary gurus. But you get inspired by people who also you can relate to on everyday basis. And I've been blessed to be part of so many organizations and so many collectives, that I am in touch with so many like the writers and mentors around me. And I see what they have done, because once I did the anthology, I became an editor first, then an author later. So I edited my anthology with one of the UK based press, the Medusa Project. And I worked with like women writers all across the world. And you learn from them. I was an editor, but I was learning on the job, as they say. I was also learning from them. So the my co-editor, Juliet Molen, I learned a lot from her. So it's, and then I joined Life and Legends, and I learned. So it's like, it's, as they say, I've been learning all these years, and I've been also trying to give back to the community. So all these editors that I've worked with, both the male and female editors, it's not only about women. I mean, I've been influenced by so many male editors, and they've uplifted my work. They have given me the platform, and they have supported me. And till now. And then I work with the Kali project, which is a 600-page anthology, and it features 200 plus women writers. So imagine the amount of exposure I got by interacting with those women writers. And some of them are like award winning and poet laureates, and some of them are emerging and established. And that kind of opens the door for me. And then I became editor of few journals, and then I won couple of competitions, and then I was invited to be part of certain organizations which has international approach, which are operating on a national level. So I'm just saying that, when I always say this to people every time, that when you have a mission in your heart, you don't worry about the intended audience, who's going to see your work or what. Because when I started my WordPress, I have zero knowledge of running a blog, and then I put my heart and soul into the blog. And WordPress has like 18 million users. There are 18 million to 21 million websites out there, but I put
Right.
my heart and soul into it. I tried, like, connected to the WordPress community. I was reading their work, I was commenting on their work, I was uplifting them. And then within like an year, my blog was rated as top 100 in the world, along with Poetry Foundation and other blogs. And I built a community there. And then it kind of opened a way for me to go into the journals and other anthologies. And obviously, I was researching more and more about socially conscious anthologies whose sales or revenues are used to support certain charities I'm passionate about,
Right.
because that was my whole idea, right? To support those charities which I'm passionate about, and to contribute to them in one way or the other. So that's the path I've chosen. And along the way, these are the people who have inspired me, and they're continuously inspiring me.
Yeah, that is awesome. Those are excellent achievements, and to be able to be be able to participate in those circles where you can learn and grow and interact with other poets and writers is definitely an awesome accomplishment. And it does sharpen your skills as a writer and provide inspiration to, for your own writing, to where you're not necessarily trying to copy anyone else, but exposing yourself to different styles and formats and voices helps, sharpen your own, in the process. So that's a beautiful thing, and much to be proud of, no question. But take me back to that moment in the beginning where you discovered your voice, and you made the definitive decision to put together that first book. Can you describe to me and the audience, what that was like, and all the feelings associated with that experience?
Yeah. So as I told you, when I started this like mission of writing, getting a book or a chapbook out was never my intention. Some people are very focused about this. They start their writing journey with like, okay, I have to write this because I have to make a collection, a theme based collection. And then you either you go through the publishing journey. My journey was different. It was more of an
Mm,
activist driven journey. So I never thought about publishing a book in the first place. So that's why it's very amusing for me to find out that I, after I was like published 650 poems in different like 120 journals across the world, and I have never published a chapbook. And then I was invited. It was just before pandemic. I remember it. I was invited by the Franklin community, like the next city, and they invited me to be part of headlining a poetry festival. And then the coordinator said that, okay, Megha, you come one day you'll be headlining, and they'll it was based on different languages. So one day there'll be a Hispanic guy, and then one day it'll be English and Hindi, and so on and so forth. And then he says that, you bring all your books, and then we will put it on a showcase and all that. And then I said, no, I haven't published any books. I have worked with anthologies, and this and that. I've been published in anthologies all over, and I've performed, but I don't have any book of mine. And then he said, no, you should, because then it kind of represents you as a person. What it brings out your perspective as a tunnel vision, because in anthology it's a curation of different writers. So that's the idea. It came to me, and that's the reason that both my chapbook and both my full length, it got accepted in the same year, because I never realized it would happen that way. And then both the acceptance from two different presses, it came in the same year, and that's how it happened. So in my life, I've become an editor first, because I edited two major anthologies, and one of them was a finalist in the Excellence Award. Another has been chosen by NASA and SpaceX as a digital payload, and
mm.
then my chapbook and my full length came. So that's my creative journey. And now it's the thing, like the more and more I connect with the people on a national level, or people even on the local level, I realize there's so much to be done. And yeah, there are more books on the way, because my work needs to become, and like they have to be thematically uh, collected together. And depending on how much time I have, because I'm also like giving my time to other purposes in my life. So it depends on how it comes, but that's how the publishing thing, it came into picture.
All right, that's awesome. Awesome indeed. Now, do you have a preference between the traditional publishing route and self-publishing, or do you feel it doesn't matter as long as you have an avenue to utilize to get your books published?
I think it doesn't really matter because it, we have seen success in both ways, right? Rupi Kaur was self-published, and after she became such a phenomena, then she was asked by publisher to publish a book. But if you ask me in terms of effort and everything, they have different intake, right? In self-published, as the name implies, you have to put in everything of yours, time, money, energy, everything. You have to build your own audience. If you have built an audience through a blog or a network or any kind of platform you have pursued, then you have to, the first step, I think, essential for any kind of route, whether it's traditional or self-published, you have to build your audience.
Right.
Because you have to build your audience in whatever way. I chose the blog way. Some people creates workshops, or some people connect with the local writers groups, they connect with the literary collectives. So there are different ways of making an audience, building your audience. And it's a give and take kind of relationship. You cannot expect people just to give you a platform if you don't support them, or if
Right.
you don't encourage them, or if you don't inspire them. And it's true in life. I mean, it's not about the literary world, it's everywhere. So why would the literary world be different? You have to support the people around you if you want the
Right.
same kind of support. So my thing is, if you ask me step ABC, my thing is you first build your audience, your network, and and first of all you have to think about the mission. What's your mission in life? What is what you want to pursue? Where do you see yourself? And second is you build your audience, and then you decide that do you have the energy to do something everything on your own, because self publishing takes a hell lot of energy and effort.
Mhm.
And then second is, and the other is getting published by a press. And now we have a myriad, like choices of selecting the presses. There are independent presses, as there are like big presses, and it's all sorts of presses. You have to do your research about what kind of press. You cannot have a scattergun approach that I have a manuscript and I will send it to every other Tom, Dick, and Harry in the town. No,
Right.
it'll be a waste of your time and energy. You have to be known by the presses in one way or the other. Either you focus on the same issues that they have been, the authors which have they have published, they have the same kind of the issues, or they have the same kind of the authors they are selecting is something which is same as you. Or you get yourself acquainted with the press, so the press knows who are you, what are you giving to us. Until and unless you don't have as an emerging poet or an author, it's very difficult to get acknowledged by a big press. So, or even with the independent presses who are award winning presses, they have their name in their own way. So I would say that that's where it comes. And obviously the traditional presses have, some of the presses have their gatekeepers, as they say, right? I mean,
Right.
it doesn't matter how much good you are. I mean, these are the pitfalls of a publishing industry, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter how good you are in your content, because I have seen people who are absolutely brilliant in their craft, but they are not coming from very traditional academia. Like, I'm not from a traditional academia. I have done my master's in computers. I have not done my BA or MFA. I've not done any internship somewhere, and that's the traditional route that everybody takes. But then you have to be so forceful and impactful in your craft. You have to hone your craft and work towards it, that they cannot say no to you.
Right. That is excellent. You brought up some very valid points, and I like that you brought up gatekeepers, because I see Patricia Carrigan on the line. She made a comment pertaining to just that the other night in the last episode. Um, in my last podcast episode, that was brought up before we had gotten started with that interview, and you're absolutely correct. Self-publishing and the traditional publishing route both have their pros and cons. And just as you stated, if you choose to go the traditional route, or to an independent press per se, like you said, sometimes you could be the best that you can be, but because of the quote unquote gatekeepers, you could be shunned. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's all about what your personal preference is, who your target audience is, what your personal goals and aspirations are in terms of your particular book projects. Using myself as an
Yeah.
example, I'm self-published, and I chose to go that route because I didn't want to wait on somebody else to determine whether or not my work is good. That's one reason. And two, I didn't want to deal with the hassle of trying to find an agent to represent me and all of the politics and particulars that pertain to that avenue. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to take the initiative to put something together that I have control over, of what I want to say, how I want to present myself, and who I want to present it to, and then just build off of that. So you brought up some very valid points that, regardless of what road we take, each requires work, but you have to know who your audience is. You have to know what message or what mission you have, and then just take it from there. So thank you for sharing that, because that's definitely an important reminder to our audience tonight, that each, no matter what path you take, it takes work, but when you put in the effort, the rewards could be endless. And you have proven that, with your own work, with your books that you've published and the publications that you've contributed to. You're an example of someone that has been in a consistent pursuit of excellence with your writing. And I do commend you and congratulate you for being able to have access to all of these opportunities, because I'm quite sure whoever is watching this episode tonight will be very inspired by your journey. So I do thank you for bringing up those valid points. Now you mentioned, in terms of your subject matter, you talk about, social issues concerning women and people of color, subjects of that nature. Are there subjects in particular that you choose to write about more than others, per se? Like, do you have any favorite subjects, or do you feel like you just write about whatever comes to your heart, or whatever you're most passionate about?
I think I've consciously never chosen a subject. I mean, I've always, so inspiration has come to me at different times, at more godly times, at very like ungodly places and all that. And it can come through me through a poem which I'm reading, or a song on the radio, or something which I read about it, and different. And sometimes, especially, I can quote an instance that when we were locked down in pandemic, and it was like, on top of like the pandemic which is happening, we have the, at the start of the 2020, we have the threat from Iran for another war with US. And then the pandemic started, and then after some time, then the Black Lives Matter movements, and all that, the death of George Floyd and everything, which like galvanized the whole nation. That, so there was so much of happening around us, and I was like, oh, being stuck at home and sitting down, and you read about it, and you get enraged about it, that this is happening in 21st century, and you cannot just sit down and say that, oh, this is not happening to me because I'm not an African American. So this is a question which has been posed to me so many times, that because I've written about the systemic oppression of people of color and African American, I've written about Ahmed Arbery, I've written about a lot of people who've gone through that trauma, and they said that you are not African American, so how does it relate to you? So I always tell that just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it'll not happen to you, right? So
Exactly.
on the basis of that, I actually wrote a CNF piece which was called "Don't Wait Till You Become a Hashtag,"
Mhm.
because the
Wow.
identity is reduced to a has, and it got published in Lumiere Review, and it got picked up by Stanford University. So that's how the journey in the Stanford University started. So because I was like, hate, as I have one of the poems which where I mention is that hate doesn't have any gender, the cries do not have any religions, the scream does not have any gender. So it's like, just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it'll not happen to you later. And second of all, empathy is what it makes us humans, right? If you don't have the empathy for someone else, if someone else is going through something, how can you call yourself a human being? And empathy is something which is needed for the social and environmental justice. And why I was very inclined towards poetry is because poetry stimulates empathy, right? And it connects it's all in a, I mean, you'll read a news in a newspaper and it'll affect you. But if somebody writes a poem and a spoken word, everybody knows the effect of spoken word on people, right? It moves you from within and it leaves you an effect for like so many days. So that's the whole idea behind it. So the thing was like, you don't have to wait for it. And seriously, after that there was hate crimes against the RP community, right?
Right.
After the Black Lives Matter movement, and I was like, look, it's that the thing, the hate doesn't have a gender. It'll go from, and if you stay mute and blind to these issues, it'll be at your doorstep, and you will be affected by it sooner or later, and you'll not be even prepared for it. So that's my whole idea of informing the people that you have to educate yourself about the issues which are surrounding you, and you have to generate the awareness about the issues. You don't have to wait for something that, oh, I am not white, it will not happen to me. I'm not black, it will not happen to me. I'm not a woman, it can't happen to me. Or the different issues. And because we're living in a global world, we are global citizens, so we have to have that empathy. Otherwise there's no point of being a human being, right?
Absolutely. And you brought up some very valid and important points. And you just reminded me of a quote that was circulating on social media, and I'm paraphrasing. The quote went along the lines of, they went after this group, but I didn't speak up. Then they went after this group, but I
Yes.
still didn't speak up. Then they went after this group, but I didn't speak up. Then they came after me, but there was nobody around to speak for me.
Yes, exactly.
I'm paraphrasing, but that's the whole idea that you just described. It's like we don't have the luxury of staying silent.
Yeah. And that's the that I know this quote, and I know it's a very apt and it's a moving quote. And my full length, I've also addressed one of the quotes from the great poet and educator Sonia Sanchez. And she says, all poets and writers are political. They either maintain the status quo, or they say something's not right, let's change it for the better. So I think it's, as a poet and a writer, it's a crucial responsibility to bring that change in front of people, to make them aware of the change. I mean, what good is a craft if you cannot do something, bring something positive? And it doesn't have to be a, one, like, like a global change kinds of thing. A change even in the smallest of the way, which even affect one person in your life, it's a good change, right? So I always say that if you have the passion in your heart, you take the smallest first step towards it. And if you are true to it, towards it, then it'll catch fire and burn. And that's what happened with me exactly, right? I never realized that one day just opening a blog, and then another day I'll be working for Stanford University, or I'll be working for United Nations, or I'll be like, invited to be part of National League of American Pen Women, which is a 125 years old organization.
Wow.
So it and this is the journey, and I am proud of it, but I want this journey to be a inspiration for other people, because I've been inspired by so many people around me. They have inspired me in their own way. So that's my message from this.
Absolutely. And that's awesome, because each one reach one, teach one. You never know where
Exactly.
your words are going to take you, and you never know how your words are going to have an impact.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's a beautiful thing, and that's a beautiful frame of mind to be in when you're talking about what your purpose is as a writer, and the willingness and the desire to have an impact with your words. So that's a beautiful thing, no question. Now, throughout your writing journey, who would you say has inspired you? Like, who moves you? Who grabs your attention as a poet?
Oh, so I cannot name one person. I mean, even in like poets, in the contemporary poets, I've been naming few poets, but I cannot say that, oh, this is the one person who inspires me, because they have their own journey, and they bring their own message and their own inspiration in a way. But yeah, as I say, because I'm mostly driven towards social issues, and most of the writers of our time, as I name them, right, they most of them, you can't live away from the social issues. I mean, your poetry might, even you might not be thinking you're writing about something issues which is affecting you one way or the other. So that's where my the when my full length, it talks about my body lives like a threat. So it talks about like the body politics and the issues surrounding it, right? So the even the issues of gun violence, even the issue of reproductive rights violence, even the issues of migration and displacement. So what I try to stress on that is like a body issue, a body politics, it never remains at an individual level, but it grows and births the social monster, and it's at the intersection, at the core of all these issues. I mean, the body of a woman is seen as a threat, right? A body of a migrant worker is seen as a threat. A body of a person of color is seen as a threat. A body of a refugee is seen as a threat. So that's how I have addressed all these five different issues in my five different section of the full length. And when I read works of so many like contemporary poets, so to say, and they are addressing, though they are addressing very specific issues through their work. For example, I told you like Kaveh Akbar, he talks about his addiction, and but he also talks about the other issues, gender-based discrimination and everything. And Jericho Brown talks about police brutality and suppression of a person of color, but he also talks about motherhood. He also talks about, so these are intersectional issues. You cannot talk about one. These are they are like connected to each other, as you mentioned before. So there is a level of intersectionalism, and therefore there is not, I cannot name one person or one poet which I read. I'm reading Ocean Wong these days. I'm reading one of his novels, and he's a poet, but he also wrote a novel, right? And through his poems he talks about the the issues of as an LGBTQ from the community. He's a gay, and he talks about his, the internal struggle that, but he also talks about the migration and displacement issues that he has to face as a Vietnamese, right? So these are the issues. So if you ask me that one poet actually inspired me, no, because I was always reading, because I didn't come through a very traditional route. So I wasn't reading one person as a syllabus or a curriculum. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I was jumping from one thing to another. I was even reading like Shane Silverstein. He's a fifth grade poet, right? Like it's he's meant for his poetry is meant for like kids, right? But when you read his poems, they are so profound in the way that the deep message they carry, that even a kid can make it something out of it, and even when an adult reads his poems, they can get a message out of it. So I've been reading those poems, then I've been reading Maya Angelou, and I've been reading Tracy Smith, then I read like, so there's a whole spectrum of poems, and there is no end to it. I
Mhm.
mean, it depends on what you are focused about. And because they are all brilliant, their poetic craft is brilliant, and they have their own different forms. Like Jericho Brown, he introduced a new form in poetry, to like, crying out loud. He introduced duplex, right, by merging three different forms of poetry. So it's a journey of theirs, and you can read about their work, get inspired by them, and see what you can draw from them, right? I always call myself as a sponge, because I'm always, sucking up and looking for inspiration in my life, and getting all the bits, because there's enough of hate and enough of violence around us, and we don't have to seek like you know all that in people. If you seek for goodness and kindness in people, that's what you're going to look at, and that's what you're going to receive. But if you always look for hate and all the other vices, you will, as they say, you will get what you seek. So I mean, that's one of the questions somebody like put me, that there's so much of divisiveness in the literary world. There are groups, there are camps. So, and you work with so many groups and camps, so how come you're working with camps who are not even so friendly with each other? So I was like, I only look for what good they have to offer. And if you and that's basically a representation of the life we are living, right? In the extreme world of like, people are divided by their opinion about politics, religion, parenting, you name it, right? We all have our own facts and opinion. But when it comes to the goodness for humanity, we all have to think about that. And pandemic is an excellent example of it. People might not be comfortable about it, but they're doing it for the community, wearing a mask, following the guidelines and everything, and for themselves. And then there are some other factions of the community also who don't care, and they don't follow because they only care about themselves. So you see that in the society. So art always reflects society, and society always reflects art, right? So that's how it goes. I know I've taken the question in some other direction.
No, no, that was you want to talk about a 7-course meal. This is what you're giving me. I'm loving it. I'm loving it because you are so correct. Because at the end of the day, you know, we have more in common than what we have different. So if, like you said, if we take the time to focus on the good, to focus on the positive, to focus on what brings us together, that in itself is going to be the catalyst that brings about the changes that we need to see in the world. And
Yeah.
you know, and like you stated, you know, poets have a responsibility to speak to the issues, to speak to the times, you know, to speak truth to power, to speak relevance to what's happening currently. So you're absolutely correct. You know, we have to focus on the good, we have to focus on what matters, and just push aside what doesn't, because that's what
Yeah.
will make the difference. Now, when we're out of all of that comes the point of the term representation. You've heard representation talked about in different circles. Now, in terms of yourself and your writing, how important is it to you to make sure that you're representing yourself in your totality when it comes to your writing, in terms of, you know, being a woman, a person of color, maybe involving your ethnicity or religion, you know, all of those things together? How important is it to you to make sure that you're representing yourself fully?
I think when it comes to representation, it's more about the issues which you are passionate about, rather than the religion, ethnicity, or individual identity. Because these are the issues which are at the fundamental level, right? But when you build on top of it, at the end of it, the issues which are there in the society, they are affecting every one of us, irrespective of the caste, creed, gender, nationality, ethnicity, right? So yeah, I want to be represented as a woman of color or as a like a first generation immigrant, but by the end of the day, as I said, all these issues are intersectional. They are affecting a man of color, they are affecting other people, immigrant, right? He can be a man, he can be a person for LGBT community, and they are also, you know, have been witness of hate crime, right? If a immigrant is a witness of xenophobia and bigotry, so is the LGBTQ community, right? So I think the representation stops at the level which basically defines you, but it starts at the level where it starts defining the society. So what defines your society? What society are you living in? That matters more than what's your individual representation, right? Because we are basically the microcosms of a society, but what does a society represent by the end of the day? It should matter more to you than you being a Hindu, or you being a woman, or you being a first generation immigrant. I mean, I find it, I that's the thing which stirred me. I mean, I was so moved by, I mean, I was so disturbed by, so to say, by the hate crime and the systemic oppression of the people of color, or especially the African American. And to be very honest, I didn't know about the history of 400 years, right? Right. So I have to educate myself. So I read about it, and then the, from the first time the Mayflower actually landed on the shores of Virginia, how they brought the slaves, and how from 400 years that has been like perpetuated in the society. And I'm like, good heavens. And there is police brutality, there is police violence, and it's not stopping. We are in 21st century, so something has to be done about it. And it's not like that George Floyd was the first or the last person to be killed in a police violence. He's not, right? But and it's not like the African American community was not moved, or they didn't do the protest, or they didn't, you know, did their own share. But it didn't stop there, right? Unless it was not only the United States that Black Lives Movement happened, it happened across the world. So until and unless you don't represent a global community, or you don't come as a force, nothing will happen. And you will lost in your own individual, you know, personality and representation. So that's how it that's where it is. That's why I think that's where I became an editor first, then an author, because I wanted to work with people and represent their work more than representing my own work. Because I was like, I know I have a voice, and I never thought of publishing a book or a chapbook. And that's how I edited first, and I became editors of different journals first, and edited two like thick volumes of anthology, and then I published my chapbook. So what all I'm saying is, yes, individual representation matter, but it matters on a very micro level. It the society, what the society represents, should matter more.
Right, right. Thank you for sharing those points. And on that note, that provides the perfect segue, because now I'm going to give you the opportunity to share your voice. Now, Megha, it's time for you to take the mic. So at this time, I would like for you to share up to 5 poems of your choosing on, any subject, to give our audience an idea of, who you are as a writer and your writing style and things of that nature. So at this time, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Noel. So I'm going to be reading 5 poems from my full length. My Body Lives Like a Thread. And as you can see, the image is by a New Jersey based sculpture artist. It's called Carried Trauma, and it represents the upper torso of a woman and with the thread. So my book basically is divided into 5 sections, and each section focuses on one issue, as I mentioned before. So I think it's apt for me to pick one poem from each section and tell you a bit about it. So the first section is called Black Truth, and it deals with the suppression of people of color in and around the world. So this poem is a national level winning poem, and it's called Peace, a Metaphor for Denial. Peace, an act of ignorance, an act of denial, is not bliss, no more. When silence is gutted like a fish and the blood of your own fills the street, how long can you be the puppet in your own peaceful country? This act of abandonment speaks a muted language for all the hearts trapped like sparrows on the other side of town. The wall creates a boundary between me and humanity. They are still considered illegal with one foot in my land, another bloodied and stuck in the barbed wire that I put around God's own country. I was born with the privilege to call the piece of earth my own, no matter it is laced and seeped with someone else's blood. It belongs to me now. The young boy is shot. The pavement is stained by the color of his blood, dark and useless to the people of this peaceful country. Those who pull out the armrest and beat chairs to see the stars lit up the sky and the deafening noise, muting the wails of a widowed mother. They sip the beer as cold as their souls, leaving the scene with a shrug and a short sigh. Ignorance is bliss. Peace is a metaphor for denial in this country I call mine. And the second poem is called Does Hurt Have a Gender? And as I was talking before, it poses a question to the readers and the listeners, and it stresses the fact that hurt doesn't spare anyone. Does hurt have a gender? What does a body want when it breaks down into a million pieces? Its pulverized existence wanting acceptance, only to be ignored and walked over, left over, like a day old milk on the kitchen counter, forgotten and left to cuddle. Why do we keep numbing the sharp pain, the knotted lamentation caught in our hungry mouths, that cuts our soul both ways and leaves us to bleed in this world, profused with sweat and blood, a moment indescribable, leaking and soaking the ridges of the curbside? Here, the thickness of your blood, its viscosity, and the gravitas of your speech depends on the color of your skin, a pain untenable, an insurmountable pain rising in my mouth, a dichotomy between pain and acceptance, a desire abominable. Do screams have a religion too? Do cries have a race? Does hurt have a gender? Do wounds have a nationality? Does your tongue curl into sin when you call out my name? Does the triteness of your ideologies still mollify your pain? And the third poem is from the section My Body is Not an Apology, and it's called False Ownership. This poem was written in response to the reproductive right bill. So, false ownership. This is strangely annoying when you see arrogance in someone who doesn't own a thing, can't conjure a thing out of thin air, let alone a human being. You are just the renter here. You don't own shit. You are born from this womb that cradles your existence for months, a sliver away from called a being. Nothing but a pulsating existence in a foreign body. Sometimes the body treats it like an infection to keep away the contamination, self purging, an act of reclamation. Sometimes it accepts, cups its own palm, supports you, carries it to term. It's the body, the arrangement, the unsaid understanding, a solemn promise between the body and its identity. Your existence is slowly molded like a ball of sagging clay on the potter wheel, morphed and molded to be called the human being. You don't own the womb. You definitely don't own our bodies. You break the arrangement just like to possess the things. Let me clear this. For the sake of your understanding, the body is not for your taking. There is a thin line between the choices we make and your wanting. And the next one is from the section My Body Lives Like a Thread, and it's called hashtag games. We play hashtag games every time the evil scratches its belly. Hunger plays on its forked tongue, mocking humanity. A tag for every survivor, a label for every day. Smears the face with its ashen truth. Justice delayed is justice denied, they willfully say. A day to mourn the loss where some girl regrets life. Her dreams broken and pulverized, dying a muted death. The day changes, atrocity switches masks, a new hashtag, and pain takes a new name, a new march, a new route to follow, new placards to paint, and new colors to wallow. We keep strangulating our moments, life being squeezed out of them. Black Mondays and dark Fridays, the debilitating pain, till we find the new low and start all over again. We play hashtag games. Victim changes faces, a hamster on a wheel, but the perpetrator remains the same. And I think it's my fifth poem, and it's from the final section, which is called My Body Lives Like a Threat. And it's the title poem for my full length. My body lives like a threat. A wound opens its mouth and becomes self inflicting, just like the night in its extreme, vulnerable to a ray of light, its existence challenged, and yet it stands bravely, unfettered by the challenges of the dawn. As I catch the words in my mouth, my language becomes an open threat, my razor speech falling sharp on your dull convictions. We always expose our deepest and softest parts to heal. That's how the body learns to heal, to grow. To be vulnerable is an elegy for acceptance. We have hunger written all over us, with the ink as black as the mole on your shoulder, challenging the frothiness of the moonlight. My unspoken words sit like a welt on my tongue in this foreign world. Every time I twist my tongue to shape a word, mispronounce your fear, a new threat is born. Thank you so much for listening.
Wow, wow. I barely have any words because your poetry is powerful, and it's not only powerful, but it's powerful with a message. Words full of significance, and I just thank you, I'm truly inspired. I thank you so much for sharing those words. I'm absolutely floored by the power in your words, and I just thank you so much for taking time out to share your work. And congratulations on that release and everything that you have coming up. I do appreciate you taking the time to share your poetry tonight. Now, at this time, I want to take a few minutes before we close.
I'd like to thank all the people who's writing such nice words about me in the comments, and I'll thank them personally. I can see all of them being so supportive and kind towards my work. I worked with them. I'm still working with them, and I'm really thankful that they have taken the time out of their schedule and they've joined this session. Thank you so much.
Yes, the chat was definitely lit because you were dropping some serious word bombs with your poetry, very powerful and hard hitting with a message. So at this time, I want to have a few minutes for our audience Q&A session. So at this time, if there's anyone on the line that has a question or comment for Megha Sood, feel free to unmute yourself and give your question or comment.
Hi, Noel. This is Amira. May I ask
Hey,
a question?
Amira.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well, thanks.
So it's the artist question and answer session. So I know that My Body is Not an Apology started out as a chapbook. And now it's a full-fledged volume of poetry, or volumes of poetry. Megha, why did you decide to release it first as a chapbook and then grow into a full-fledged book of anthology of poems?
Hi, Amira. Thanks so
Hi.
much for the question. So yes, as I told you that I never thought that both the chapbook and the full length will be published so close to each other. But the chapbook basically focuses mainly on body shaming and the issues about like body positivity, and why the self love is the best form of love. So most of the poems in that, it talks about women and the issues with like body shaming, right? And but when I was working on the chapbook, I realized that every time I'm writing about this, the issues are like jumping from this issues to some other issues, as reproductive rights violation, gun violence, migrant issues, and all the other issues. So I see my chapbook, and so that's when I realized that this cannot stop here. It has to become an extension of a bigger full length where I can add more poems to the collection and I can divide it into section. And I did it very consciously because the last poem in my book, in the chapbook itself, is called My Body Lives Like a Thread. Because I was like, from here, it is the common string which, like, threads all the issues in my full length, that the body politics remains at the core, and how it affects the different issues around your life, like from the gun violence, the migrant issues, and xenophobia, bigotry, and obviously the women issues of body politics also. So then it has to grow into a bigger collection which also addresses the other intersectional issues with them. So that's how it grew into that. And even then, when I'm like done with the full length, I see more and more issues which comes as a first generation migrant, right? So that's always at the back of my head. So
Thank
thanks for
you.
asking the question.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, Amira. Good to see you. Anyone else would like to share a question or a comment? Well, actually, you know what? I'll jump in with one, Megha. Out of out of out of everything that you've accomplished up until this point, like, what would you say is the one? Like, I'm quite sure you have several different goals that you wish to accomplish with your work. But is there any one particular thing that you would like to accomplish with your work? Does any one thing in particular stand out as a goal?
I think I see it in a two-way approach, because first, as you mentioned that I always wanted to break this notion that you have to be from the academia world to do something significant and meaningful in the poetry world, because you have to follow a particular trajectory to get noticed. And uh, I'm kind of thinking that I have in my own way have made my name in some sections of the society where I'm working with the, renowned poets. And they I haven't followed a very, a traditional trajectory of being in the academia, but I'm still working with those poets and professor all across the world as part of the Life in Quarantine project in Stanford University, right? So they made me the literary curator for their project, and now I'm working with like poets and writers and award winning poets and poet laureates across the globe. So that's one thing that I want to bring it out or put it out there, that you don't have to come from a specific set of people to achieve something in life. You have to be truthful to your passion, right? And then it'll make some changes in its own way. It'll open doors, one after the other, and you have to have that kindness and empathy in your heart, because and that'll open more and more doors for you. And the second thing is, yeah, obviously, as uh, I cannot say that I represent all the issues in the world. No, there's certain issues which comes down with my identity, and obviously they'll be more spoken about than other issues. But there are two sets to it. Like, one is as a woman, as a mother, as a first generation immigrant, and a person of color, I'll have my own set of issues. But then I have to see beyond these issues and see what else is affecting the world. Like, I have written about like environmental justice as well, because guess what, we are part of it, right? We are contributing to its uh, demise, or we are contributing to the way that we are in. So I so and then you gun violence and violence in school and all, because my son is affected by it, right? At the age of like 5 6 years, he's been doing blue drills in the school, and he's always used to come back and ask me that why are certain people wants to kill me and all that. And gun violence is one of the core issues which is prevalent in United States of America, it being the developed country in the world, right?
All right.
So so I think what I see is, there is certain issues which will be always be tied to your identity, but there are certain issues will always be tied as a society, as a social being, and you cannot pinpoint. You cannot just be representative of one specific issues in your life.
All right, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else like to share a question or a comment before we close?
Oh, I see Dr. Santosh here. That's so nice of you to join.
Oh, awesome, awesome.
Yeah,
Good
she's
to see
joining from
you.
India in some ungodly hour, and I really appreciate that.
I
Uh,
was I was actually in another meeting, and I was I knew about this. I wanted to come here, but I thought it was about to be over. So nice to see you. It was wonderful. I could catch only the last few paragraphs of what you said. So it's great, and hearty congratulations. One of these days, I'm going to read your book and hearing a lot about it. And
Thanks.
hats off to you. It's wonderful, and I'll review it. And thanks, Neil, for inviting me over. It's a pleasure being here.
awesome. Good
Thank
to see you, Santosh. Thank you so much for joining in tonight.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank
I was
you.
just trying to venture into it because I was commuting between two events.
Right. Glad you can make it out, though. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Anyone else like to share a question or comment before we close out?
Oh, I see a question in the chat. Jacqueline is asking, are you joining us again at the Patterson? Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yes, count me in too, because that last year was my first time and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm definitely going to be there too. No
Yes.
question.
And that's how I met you, Noel, right? I met you in person there.
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, that's absolutely correct. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. And Amira also, I
Oh,
think,
yeah. And Amira, yeah, I met
yeah, I
her
think
in
most of us on the line tonight, I met there in person for the first time. So that was an awesome, that was an event to remember for sure. Quite
Yeah.
enjoyable.
It's quite a party now that we all meet and we all represent certain issues, and we support and uplift each other. And Amira is an excellent example. Patricia is an excellent example. And then I haven't met
Yes.
Patricia till, but I'm sure I will meet her in person one day for sure. And yeah, and it's so good to meet everyone in person now, and it brings a certain level of like, camaraderie, that we are doing our
Yes.
in our own way. And I'm so happy, and like
And
thanks for
Megha, one of these days I'm going to feature you in my blog. So beware of that.
I can honor Dr. Santosh.
I can ask insane questions, so beware of that.
Wow, I'm looking forward to that. I'm sure that'll be
Thank you.
awesome.
Me, you too.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, if
Thank you
there,
so much.
thank you. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to close out for the night. I'm just going to share one more screen. I want to take this time to say thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank Megha Sood. Awesome, dynamic conversation and phenomenal poetry. Poetry that's powerful, poetry with a solid message, poetry that's relevant. Thank you so much for taking the time to let me interview you tonight. This was excellent. Now, for those of you that wish to follow Poets with Purpose, you can find me on Facebook, Poets with Purpose, Facebook group, on Twitter @PoetsWPurpose, YouTube channel of the same name, and I just recently joined Clubhouse @The Anointed Pen. Now, stay tuned for the next episode. Episode 26 will be featuring poet and author James Ellerbee, which some of you may be familiar with. He's another awesome poet in his own right. His interview will be taking place on Friday, March 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, for more information about my podcast or the Poets with Purpose Poetry Workshop, you can call me at 646-372-6230, or you can email me at poetswithpurpose@gmail.com. All of my logos and flyers have been designed by the great team at Eclipse Graphics, New York. You can find them on Instagram @SignEclipseGraphics, NY. And lastly, for those of you that wish to make a donation, you can do it through either PayPal, Tap MediaMan, $The Anointed Pen, or on Zelle, utilizing my phone number. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes episode 25 with Megha Sood. Thank you, Megha, for being my guest. Thank you all to my audience tonight for your support and participation. This video should be uploaded to my YouTube channel within the next hour or so. So be on the lookout for the notification for that. Once that's done, you all are free to share it amongst your own social media channels. Thank you all so much for your support. It's greatly appreciated. And I'll see you all soon. Have a good night and God bless. Thank you. Bye-bye.